How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. While I am working on my Dark Souls damage video, there have been a couple of things that I have read about, researched, or discovered that I've wanted to make a quick one-off, as I think they are worth exploring a little bit on their own. As I walk away from this waterfall, it's really loud. This one is going to cover the Lifehunt Scythe. Now, the Lifehunt Scythe is an incredibly powerful weapon. I obviously have very high stats, 58 strength, 50 dexterity, but it is at +0, and you can see it has a raw damage of 180 and scaling one-handed of 161, in comparison to the Great Scythe, which is only at 186 combined damage, which is just barely ahead of the flat damage that the Lifehunt Scythe has. Anyway, enough about that. So what the Lifehunt Scythe does is it inflicts extra bleed on weapons. Here you see the Great Scythe has a bleed auxiliary of 300, where the Lifehunt Scythe has a bleed auxiliary of 500, and all that means is it does 30 points of bleed damage for the Great Scythe and 50 points of bleed damage for the Lifehunt Scythe. Most enemies that are susceptible to bleed have a certain bleed threshold. I'm using Scythe as my test, as she has 200 bleed resist. So with the Great Scythe, you'll see we need 7 hits. 30 times 7 is 2100, which is enough to make her bleed. So if we do this here, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, and there you see that she bleeds. I'm just going to back out here so we can get a fresh health bar. Quick reason why that she is not moving: I'm using the DSR gadget, which allows you to turn off enemy AI. Thank you to user, I think it's VaporeWave, for the suggestion to use that tool as opposed to using something like Cheat Engine, where you can, in this one, turn off the AI. Anyway, this one, the Lifehunt Scythe, has a very powerful drawback in that it does a lot of bleed damage to you whenever you swing. So here you see I swing once, and I get a good amount of bleed build up on myself. So if we do 5 hits, but as you can also see, that was quite a bit more bleed damage than using the Great Scythe by itself. I think it's about 5%. I'm going to analyze the pixels in Photoshop and figure out what the approximate bleed is. But the real key as to why I'm making this video, as you probably already knew that the Lifehunt Scythe does a little bit of extra bleed damage, is to show that you can stack bleed buildup with a separate weapon, switch over to the Lifehunt Scythe, and you still get the extra bleed damage. So again, Great Scythe does 300 bleed buildup, which is actually 30 bleed buildup. Scythe has 200 bleed resist, so we hit her 6 times with this. 3, 4, 5, 6. Switch over. And then there you see we do that extra bleed build up, and we don't quite build up as much bleed on ourselves, which is a fantastic use. And I think if you want to use this as a main weapon, again, it's very strong, but that build-up is sometimes intolerable when you are using it in long, drawn-out fights. So if you have 2 bleed weapons, and again, if you're using the Great Scythe, you probably already have the stats that make the Lifehunt Scythe pretty good as well. Maybe try using both of those, one in your primary weapon slot and the other in your secondary weapon slot. And then after you do a few hits with one, switch over to the other, as that way you won't have to dedicate a ring spot to the Blood Bite ring or a shield spot to the Blood Shield. So I'm going to go ahead and analyze the health bars and what the actual bleed damage is, and we'll wrap up this video. Okay, so after I ran some numbers, here's what I figured out, just for clarity purposes, I suppose. The Great Scythe and almost every other bleed weapon in the game besides the Priscilla's Dagger, which also has the same bleed properties as the Lifehunt Scythe, does around 6.5 segments of a boss's health bar. And just for clarity, if you can count them on screen, it's a little bit difficult, I know, at times, but there's 13 segments that are divided up into 5 sub-segments for a total of 65 overall segments. And again, the Great Scythe does around 6.5 of those, which is roughly 10% of a boss's HP. The bleed proc from the Lifehunt Scythe is around 12 of those segments, which is around 18 to 19% of a boss's HP. And then at the very bottom, I'm also showing what the total damage would be, and you can see that the bleed from the hits match exactly. Where again, this was when I hit Scythe a few times with a regular bleed weapon and then switched for the final bleed trigger on the Lifehunt Scythe, which does quite a bit more bleed damage. It is nearly double the amount of bleed damage on a boss, which is a lot. Again, there's benefits and there's negatives to using the Lifehunt Scythe. Obviously, again, you really have to think about dedicating a ring slot or a shield slot for the Blood Bite ring or the Blood Shield. But this was just, again, a real quick one-off that I wanted to put out there, as I'm going to also mention this in the upcoming video, but I wanted to put this out there as I think it's kind of neat and I didn't want it to get glossed over. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to look out for the Dark Souls damage video explained, hopefully coming out here in the next couple days. Until then, thanks for all the support recently, and we'll see you in the next video.